How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? What's the real truth about Citizen Kane?
It'll probably turn out to be a very simple thing.
Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I'm Parker.
And I'm Max.
And welcome back to another episode of Better Than Citizen Kane, the highly subjective show where we look at a movie and ask that titular question. Because when every movie remains a reasonable contender for the title of greatest film of all time, you have to wonder,
is there a baritone in the house?
No, it's Better Than Citizen Kane.
Ah, well, that's great, actually, because what this country needs is fewer movies better than Kane. Fortunately, this week I've brought Dorothy Arzner's Merrily We Go to Hell, 1932, to the show. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, I wouldn't say this movie is not better that early in the episode. Who would do that?
Who would do
but
that?
Like, Parker, and I'll admit this, I wrote the intro for this before doing research. But before I did research, I was like, is this the least interesting movie we've brought to the show?
It's an interesting claim,
isn't it?
I'm
looking
at
the
back.
episode, looking back, even just this year, by the way, happy midpoint of the year, everyone.
We made it, folks.
We've done 13 episodes this year, and we have 13 left to go.
Mm-hmm.
But like, even movies like Mank are a little more interesting. Not more interesting, but just like they have more to talk about almost,
Sure.
And you go a little further back, you go to last year, we have, I would say last year, least interesting episode. I don't know. Nothing comes to mind immediately.
I would maybe argue, love it though I do. I would maybe argue that House on Haunted Hill might be on that list of like,
sure,
not a lot to talk about in this,
That's a good point. Yeah. Because again, it's like, it's not even necessarily looking at our shortest episodes, because some of our shortest episodes, I feel like we did just get through the conversation quickly.
Totally.
I think House on Haunted Hill is a good pick, Parker. I think that is a good point.
But I see what you're saying though, and I had a similar thought while watching the film, and I was like, this will be interesting.
Yeah, because on our little structure here that I instituted when we had one too many guests that didn't really fully understand what the show was going to be, the structure we have written here, it's bullet point intro, bullet point why talk about this in conversation with Kane. Sometimes we cover that, sometimes we skip right over it because it's obvious, sometimes we just forget to cover it. When I watched, this was my second time watching this, I'd seen this before. I didn't remember anything about it.
Okay.
Going into this, I was like, it's Dorothy Arzner. I remember after watching it for the first time, I watched the behind the scenes stuff on the supplemental materials on the Criterion release, and learned how cool Dorothy Arzner was.
Dorothy Arzner's rad.
She's rad. She's a really cool figure. So in some ways, I'm glad I brought this to the show just so we can talk about Dorothy Arzner. You've seen another Dorothy Arzner film. Which one's that?
Dance Girl Dance. I've seen.
Would you say Dance Girl Dance would have been more interesting to bring to the show?
Probably. I think.
Okay. Because this is the only of hers I've seen.
Yeah, like Dance Girl Dance, I think has not to say that this film does not have a feminist lean to it, because it absolutely does, but Dance Girl Dance is more direct in that approach.
Yeah.
And also Dance Girl Dance is interesting just because it's featuring a lot more people we all recognize, it's kind of Lucille Ball's breakout role.
Okay, so that comes after this. So that's in Arzner's phase of her career when she's an independent director for hire.
Yes, 1940 is Dance Girl Dance.
Very interesting. So that's 9 years after this. This is Dorothy Arzner's 10th film. She worked in the silent era.
Yeah.
And into the sound era. I don't know if she actually directed a film. No, her feature debut was 1927.
Fashions for Women.
Yes.
Which is a lost film.
Yeah. Yeah, so backtracking a little bit before we dive all in on this. I had seen this before. I remembered liking it. And I think I put it on the calendar mainly because I was like, it's interesting to talk about Dorothy Arzner.
Totally.
It's it's a film that predates Kane, which we're always a fan of on the show. And I remembered how much I enjoyed Is There a Baritone in the House?
It's a good
That
joke. It's a
stuck in my
good
head
bit.
so hard that I was like, I have to show this to Parker.
Yeah.
And let me just say, watching the movie, having forgotten what it was about, you'd already seen it by the time I watched. You beat me to this. You
Yes.
watched it before I did. Watching this, I was like, I made Parker watch this. And it's not bad. The only reason I say that is because if I had recommended this to you, if I had brought this to the show 2 years ago,
Uh-huh.
devastating decision. Just a little. It's not, I don't want
Sure.
anyone out there to think Parker had a drunkard phase. No. But
No.
there are elements to this film.
There are things about this movie that maybe would have cut me to the quick pretty badly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That being said, how often do you watch a pre-code film generally?
Dude, pre-code
And
is wild. I
and
love
also just like
pre-code.
forgetting like one, the fact that this movie is called Merrily We Go to Hell, which was controversial when it came out.
Sure.
It's
a hell of a lot better than the book title, though.
It is. I, Jerry, take thee, Joan. By the way, found almost nothing online about Cleo Lucas, the author of I, Jerry, take thee, Joan. I found one little blurb about her, which is from a website called Kinorium, which is mainly talking about this movie in relation to like the movie that adapted it.
Okay.
Talking about this book, rather. And it says Cleo Lucas was an author known for her keen insight into human relationships and the societal norms of her time. Her writing often reflected the challenges faced by individuals in maintaining personal integrity amidst societal pressures. And I go, that sounds awfully similar to just what Dorothy Arzner's career was like. And I can't really find any other information about
Sure.
Cleo Lucas. And I did find a picture of her on eBay, but it was sold.
Ah.
But if you wanted to buy a photo of the author, you could have. You missed your chance.
Damn.
Yeah. Anyway, all that aside, Parker, let me continue our routine, which is asking you, what is your history with this film? Nothing?
Nothing.
Yeah.
I knew only of this because you had suggested it to me and brought it up during one of our many Criterion sales, just sorting through things. Just, have
Yeah.
you seen this? You'd hold that up. And then I would talk about Dance Girl Dance, and those would be our two kind of Arzner, points of reference.
Those were the 2 points of reference that we had. I would
Yeah.
say, you seen this? And you'd say, no, I've seen the other one. And I go, okay.
Yeah.
And so all that to say, did you enjoy this movie?
Uh, yeah. Like, I mean, like I had a good time with it. I thought that
Yeah.
the central performances were strong. I thought that it it's interesting because I think it very much, I don't know, we keep circling this drain this year. I don't know what it is of just movies of girl, you could do so much better, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
But like I genuinely some very good laughs out of me. Had no idea Cary Grant was going to show up in this and was bowled
Me
over when he
neither.
did.
I
And I was like,
forgot.
whoa.
Yeah. He's just
Yeah.
there for like
He's
one
just here.
scene.
Mm-hmm.
He's like 28 in this. It's
Crazy.
wild.
Yeah, he's a little baby face. It's nuts.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about that sometimes where like I get that way where, I can only exist in my present self, obviously, but like you get so used to what like movie stars and public figures to look like at a certain age that then when
Yeah.
you see them younger, you're like, oh, a baby face. And then I realize I'm like, oh, somebody will say that about me someday. Like right now, somebody will look back on this video and be like, oh, look at him. He's so young. He's such a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It'll be
wild.
me.
It'll be you.
It'll be me. This podcast ultimately is just like the platonic version of Dead Wife videotape. I'm hoping that one day after you're dead, I can watch all of these videos back and be like, he was so young then.
He was so young. He was so full of life.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's really good.
um, yeah. I also enjoy this. I forgot how much of a melodrama this is.
Very much so. Like that was the thing that I think was a bit of a tougher sell for me.
It had, and what are your general feelings on melodramas?
Like I think I respect the art form of it. I do think that it is fundamentally, and this isn't like a capital M melodrama, but where it comes from in the tradition of like vaudevillian theater, I think that's a better place for it because it's something that kind of demands audience participation. You
Mm.
cheer when the hero comes on, you boo and hiss when the villain comes on. And like, again, this isn't trading fully within that, but it's pretty soapy, you know? It's
Yeah,
especially when we get to the end.
it really honestly, like a few years ago, someone recommended that I watch Magnificent Obsession. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-mm.
Um, well, it's very much a melodrama, and I watched it and I enjoyed it, but I was like, this is not for me. Like
Yeah,
these kind of movies that are they can be very romantic at times, they can be very soapy, like you're saying, like there's often an element of tragedy, an element of like all of that there isn't really my thing.
sure.
And I do think that what this movie's doing is interesting in that it's like it's primarily a melodrama, but the first half of the movie is, and I think this is to the movie's credit. The first half of the movie is a rom-com,
Hmm.
and then it stops being funny
Yeah.
because to Joan it stops being charming,
Hmm.
right? Like Jerry's alcoholism becomes a problem.
Right.
And I do find that interesting, especially, we talk about just like this is a pre-code film. It's not often you watch something from the 30, like, it's not often you watch like a black and white Hollywood picture that's like got hell in the title, two is about alcoholism, and
Hmm.
three ends with a miscarriage
Yeah. And four, like,
or like
prominently features an open marriage.
stillborn. Yeah,
Yeah.
and probably yeah,
Hmm.
open marriage,
Yeah.
absolutely, which feels even rarer.
Totally.
Um, it's very interesting in that way. So before we kind of get into the summary here, do you have any thoughts on what we just said? What I just said?
No, no.
Okay.
I think
Just
you hit
wanted
it.
to. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So Dorothy Arzner, we've mentioned her many times in this episode so far. She rocks.
Yeah.
For those
Super
not in the
cool.
know, I am going to be referencing a lot from Judith Main's essay for Criterion on this film.
Mm.
So I have some pull quotes from that. But Dorothy Arzner was the only woman to be making studio films in the 30s, and oftentimes her films focused on the dynamics of heterosexual courtship and marriage. She was she was an independent queer woman who lived as openly as Hollywood allowed with her partner, the choreographer Marion Morgan, for 4 decades.
Yeah.
So
A
she
long time.
was openly gay as you could be at the time.
Hmm.
She, as I said earlier, she made her directorial debut in 1927, but before that she climbed the ladder from script girl to cutter to editor to screenwriter, and then became a director. And she also directed Clara Bow's first talkie feature, The Wild Party, which is like a pretty, Clara
Yeah.
Bow, kind of the first major starlet
Yeah.
generally in Hollywood, right? One of the earliest, I would say, one of the most iconic
Yeah.
for sure. Um, and so by 1932, Arzner was well known and respected for her efficiency and problem solving, and especially for her work with women actors in particular. This, as I said earlier as well, this is her 10th film. It's also her final at Paramount. Um, she'd been with them the entire time, but they were undergoing with some financial crises at the time. She didn't really want to take a pay cut, so she left after this, and became an independent director for hire. And actually, after Merrily We Go to Hell, she would make Christopher Strong for RKO with Katharine Hepburn early in her career. So that's like kind of another emerging star whose persona she helped to create. So like
Yeah.
she has these ties to like these incredibly iconic women of film. And also she invented the boom mic.
Wild. Absolutely bonkers.
Because when Silent Star Clara Bow had an attack of nerves shooting her first talkie, this is an excerpt from an article from The Independent that came out around the time this went into the Criterion in June 2021. Arzner whipped up an early boom mic using a fishing rod so that the actress Clara Bow could speak her lines without worrying where the microphone was. Just a wild thing to just have in your,
Yeah.
your achievements. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, and then I just have some other notes on Arzner here of just like by this time she was pretty fascinated with deep focus cinematography, spatial layers when directing scenes, complex tracking shots. I mentioned it in my Letterboxd review, but she shoots the hell out of that product placement.
Oh yeah. Oh,
There's like three
absolutely.
stars and it's Hennessy, but it like
Yep.
It feels like something that would be in Citizen Kane a little bit, but
Totally.
it's pushing it on a bottle of Hennessy. Um, and so, yeah, as I mentioned earlier as well, this is adapted from a popular novel by Cleo Lucas, I, Jerry, Take Thee, Joan. That's three commas in one title. Woof.
Ooh.
A little difficult, but the basic premise is maintained in the film. It's basically the same, including some of the more granular details, like the gingerbread song and "Gee, you're swell" being one of the common witticisms, and even the phrase "Merrily We Go to Hell." Those are all from the novel.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so as far as production, there's sparse information about this
That's what I'm
online.
noticing.
Yeah. But I did a little bit more digging, and I'm sure I could have found even more if I'd kept digging, but this is what I got, and that's okay.
That's great.
Frederick March was fresh off of his Academy Award for Best Actor in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Mm-hmm.
And Sylvia Sidney was 21 and a rising star at the time. So again, there's kind of this theme of she's working with these rising stars. But Parker, you told me something really interesting about Sylvia Sidney, which I did not know really. I hadn't put together, which is
That she appears much later in her career in a couple of Tim Burton films. She is kind of the head woman of the afterlife, organization in Beetlejuice, which is a very prominent role
yeah.
for her.
And she's also the grandmother in Mars Attacks, which was
Mm-hmm.
huge for me when I realized that was one of the other ones you were referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Love Mars Attacks. It's a
Haven't seen
wild
it.
movie.
Never seen it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the seed
Hmm.
has been planted.
We have an open slot this year. Anyway, obviously this film changes the title to Merrily We Go to Hell. Better title.
Yeah.
Great title, even, I would say. But of course, Hell had to be censored in certain regions, and many newspapers refused to advertise for it.
Mm.
And the ending is different.
Oh.
So the ending of the book, Joan is not pregnant. This is kind of skipping ahead and separating who's listening to this.
Yeah.
Like, wait, don't spoil it,
Wait,
guys.
no.
Wait, I like to listen to the first 10 minutes and then I watch the movie. Joan isn't pregnant in the book. She accepts an invitation to join her old friends at a beach party where the ocean tempts her to end it all. She attempts suicide while Jerry is too busy nursing a hangover to attend to Joan until it is too late. She dies of double pneumonia. And the novel concludes with a drunken Jerry at a party, too drunk to remember that Joan has died.
Whoa.
So I do want to talk about what this story is doing, both in the book and in the movie, because I think in the movie, and you mentioned this just now with Dance Girl Dance, that's what it was called, right? You said that one has a more direct kind of feminist imprint on it.
Yeah.
What's your take on this movie's theming? That from what you said there about Dance Girl Dance, do you feel that this is a feminist film? I'm curious to get your read on it before I talk about what I've found in reading about this.
I mean, like, in some ways, yes. I think that I do find Joan to be a character who could very easily be somebody who's just put upon and isn't taking action, and she takes action a lot in this movie, which I think is a good representation, especially for the time. I think that by the end, it feels very kind of like, well, traditional marriage roles are the way to go and the only way you're going to find happiness and all these things. And I find that, I don't know, there's things about the ending specifically that just don't quite get it there for me.
Sure.
Especially compared with what I've seen else of Arzner's work. I think it's a little less direct in that way. I don't know. I'm waffling back and forth, but I feel like it's not especially. Oh, he's changed. My goodness. Oh.
I've made my video black and white.
Whoa.
Because I forgot.
All right. Well, in that case.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything. You're fine. You can stay in color.
No,
Parker.
it's too late. It's too late now. We're too
entering.
late now.
Yeah. So for those not watching the video, Parker and I when we record an episode about a black and white movie, we make our filters black and white on the Zoom
We
call.
forgot.
But we forgot. And we've forgotten most of this year when we
Most
do
of
a
the
black and
time.
white movie. For me, I literally only just remembered it because my lighting's about to get a lot worse as the sun sets, and I was like,
Oh,
black
I
and white
see.
helps, black and white helps.
Black and white helps.
Because I need to turn on a light in the room. Anyway,
Anyway, what are your
I
thoughts?
think your interpretation of that is fair because that on this watch, that is how it, like, the ending feels like it's trying to be like happy ending.
Yeah.
And I found two different accounts that say otherwise.
Okay.
One is, as I mentioned, what was her name? Judith Main, who wrote the Criterion essay about this film. And the other is from a quote from that independent article I mentioned earlier, from feminist film critic Helen O'Hara.
Okay.
So I just wanted to kind of look to these quotes and just see what we think. Judith Main, in her essay, writes, so, skipping way ahead, Jerry, does manage to sober up and tries to get in touch with Joan. But she's already kind of left him and been like, and her father continues to push him away and say she wants nothing to do with you. He finds out from the newspaper that she's had a baby, and he runs to the hospital, and the father's like, the baby's dead and she wants nothing to do with you. And he still goes in, and she's been asking for him, and he's there. And so that's kind of where we're at. But and a running thing and throughout is that he never really tells Joan that he loves her, right? So this is what Maine has to say in her essay. When he finally tells her to her face that he loves her, Joan can only laugh and cry at the same time, crinkling her eyes and scrunching her mouth into her typical expression of sadness and joy, as she calls him my baby, my baby. So when Jerry finally utters, I love you, it is unclear whether he is addressing a wife or a mother. As a hybrid of romantic comedy and melodrama, Merrily We Go to Hell leaves us with an image of death and rebirth. And then building on top of that, this is what Helen O'Hara says, because the ending is different. And obviously, I imagine that Paramount Pictures wasn't like, let's end with a suicide and the husband's so drunk he doesn't even know.
Right.
He doesn't even notice. And so when I first was reading about that, I'm like, is it supposed to be a happy ending? But this is Helen O'Hara's take, at least. If the ending purports to be a conventional restatement of Happily Ever After, you get the sense that Arzner didn't quite buy it, so neither do we. And if traditional married life is not the answer to young girls' dreams, then neither is breaking the rules. When Joan senses she has lost Jerry's affections, she proposes an open marriage that is just as hollow as her loveless relationship, even if she does get to go on a date with a very young Cary Grant, looking very dapper at the start of his film career. It still feels a little shocking to see an open marriage in a big Hollywood film today, never mind in 1932. And basically, maybe I didn't actually quote this here, but the take is from these two things is that whether the ending is meant to be a happy ending on the part of the studio, it doesn't feel that Arzner would actually believe it, because her politics and her filmmaking does not account for you can have a happy marriage as a heterosexual couple. Right. She was across all of her films, she views marriage as an institution that is kind of an entrapment of women, right? And so it is kind of odd to have this ending that's like, and for her to say like my baby, and like it feels off. Like the ending does feel off.
Yeah.
And I hadn't actually considered whether that was an intentional somebody, it must have been Maine, and I just didn't put it here. Somebody refers to it as like a satirical or like an ironic happy ending of like, this isn't actually happy. We're not meant to feel, we're not meant to be like, oh, isn't that so nice? We're supposed to be like, wait, what the fuck? Because this relationship has been incredibly contentious and problematic throughout the entire movie.
Right.
What do you think about that? Do you
it's an interesting read. Like I can certainly see that. I think that like I buy that Arzner isn't behind this ending, but the studio certainly is, and I think the film certainly is. Like I find those to be very engaging reads on it, and I think it's an interpretation that I like a lot more. But like taking it at face value for what it is and when it was made, it's harder for me to feel like, and maybe this isn't the point they're trying to make. I might be misconstruing this, but like it's harder for me to buy that this is intentionally ironic. It feels kind of like a postmodern read on it of looking
Hmm.
at it this way and saying, well, in context of the director and her life and her politics and her filmmaking, filmography, it then becomes ironic, which I think it is, but I don't know that the movie wants us to think of it that way,
Sure.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, up to that point, I do get the feeling that it is very pointed. Like everything that Joan goes through
Hmm.
with Jerry feels very pointed of like so many women fate. Like
Yeah.
it the movie and the story, it is interesting that the novel was written by a woman
Hmm.
and the film is directed by a woman, both things that are fascinating for 1931. Um, but like I do find it to be affecting of like throughout the movie the story is pushing Joan further and further. Like, how much of this can you take, really?
Yeah.
Really? How much of this are you really going to put up with? And it gets her to the point where she's like, well, we're going to have a modern marriage then. And I'm going to be able to go on, I'm going to have affairs too, if you can have
Hmm.
affairs. And that is such an unexpected for the time element to the story.
Certainly wasn't where I thought it was going.
Yeah. And then obviously she leaves for a time.
Hmm.
And then and then they reunite. I guess to your point, responding to these quotes that I've read here, these excerpts here, the original ending of the book feels like what Dorothy Arzner would have gone with.
Right.
It feels like she would have been like, that is apt.
Hmm.
Is that she literally kills herself and her drunk husband doesn't care.
Yeah.
Right? Hmm. Is there much to think about there? I don't know. I was
I
just about to say much to think about. Is there?
don't know.
Is there really? Um, yeah, I mean, from a theme standpoint, that's certainly a discussion.
Sure.
I wouldn't say, kind of preparing for the eventual point in the show when we get to criteria. I'm not sure I fully understand what this movie's trying to do because it does feel like, for the most part, I understand what it's trying to do. And
Hmm.
then the ending feels very distinct from what the overall story's trying to do,
Yeah.
unless you put that postmodern ironic read on that last shot,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So that does make it a little more difficult. Maybe we'll think of something along the way
Yeah.
as we go through the summary. Because also I do want to highlight just parts of the movie that we enjoyed.
Totally.
Um, for one, I think that after the titles are over, I love the fake city in this.
It's
Fake
nice.
city in this looks
Good.
nice.
It's good.
I think it's really lovely. It's kind of an Art Deco-y feel.
Hmm.
We pan across. Jerry Corbett is a drunkard Chicago reporter and kind of an attempting playwright
Hmm.
drunk at a party. I think I like how in media res we are
Yeah.
with this of just like, here's this guy. It's kind of like, here's this guy's natural state. Here's Joan's natural state
Hmm.
of like, she's the socialite. She's
Yeah.
an heiress to a massive fortune and he's just a drunk at a party.
Hmm.
But they do meet. And I do think there are some nice lines in this screenplay as well. Like in this first scene between them, I think they have a believable banter. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this whole opening
Yeah,
scene where they meet?
it's a good start. Especially because it, to the credit of the movie, like it is something that classic Hollywood, um, and even modern Hollywood very much likes to trade on the goofy drunk,
Mm-hmm.
like that is
Yeah.
that is a ripe area for comedy to occur in a lot of ways. It's very it's fertile ground for getting good gags for the
Yes.
time period. And Jerry is a good goofy drunk at the beginning of this. He is you laugh at him and you don't really think about it too much because we don't know the extent of this. We don't know the severity of it, the frequency, all of those things. So it's just one of those things of, yeah, it's funny to see this guy be a little silly and a little goofy. And while I can't see, like, I don't find myself immediately being like, oh, I see why she's into this guy. I could see why she's amused by him. I could see why
Yeah.
she's maybe charmed by him. And I think that works really well.
Yeah. I think it's again, I feel like it's a very small inclusion of like the other men at the party. If they're drinking, they feel a little more like, well, hey, why don't you come back in here and we can like
Yeah.
they feel a lot more typical.
Hmm.
And I think in my read of it, what's so amusing about Jerry to Joan is that he is the funny drunk character,
Yeah.
but he's also like definitely intentionally trying to charm her.
Hmm.
And she even asks the question. She's like, "Why did I let you?" After he kisses her, she's like, "Why did I let you do that?"
Yeah.
He's like, "I don't know." I can't remember what he says in response, but I like that inclusion of her asking that question
Yeah.
because it does immediately kind of give her a little bit more agency than a lot of women would have in a scene like this.
Totally.
You know, of just being like, "Why did I let like it?" Confirming to us that she let him kiss her
Hmm.
is nice. It shows that something about this guy is amusing enough to her that she's like, I'm curious, I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
interested,
Yeah.
you know, and he's talking about, you know, what he does. And yeah, I do think it's a solid start. And I do think it's immediately kind of sets itself apart from other versions of this scene that I feel I could have seen at
Yeah.
another
I
time.
agree. There's a very interesting choice that they make during this scene, kind of at the tail end of the scene,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of feels like the linchpin they are hanging this all off of. And I don't know in retrospect if it works for me or not, which is that she goes to get her coat with the guy that she came with because he
Yes.
wants to leave. And she comes back out to say goodbye. And Jerry squints at her, and we see his perspective, which is
Yes.
that she is out of focus. And then he says, "Who are you?" Like
And she
he
goes, "Oh,
doesn't, yeah.
yeah." And she goes, "Oh, never mind."
And she has a moment, like it kind of flashes before her eye. Like she has this moment of a flash behind her eyes, and she's like, "Oh, never mind." He moves on, and giving us that one POV shot kind of absolves Jerry for us in this scene of like it's understandable because like well no he just can't see her, he's blind drunk and he can't see her, and if you get
Yes.
rid of that, if you just remove that shot and you can, everything else is the same, then suddenly he becomes a lot more lecherous. He becomes a lot more
Yes.
unforgivable, you know, which is
Yes.
just it's an interesting filmmaking choice that I was thinking about in retrospect that by the time the movie was over is like that feels like maybe the most important shot in the movie for
It's
us
a
to
low.
not immediately hate this
It's a
guy.
load bearing shot.
It's absolutely a
Of
load bearing
like
shot.
he literally was so drunk he just couldn't see
He
who
just
it
couldn't see
was
her.
talking to
And
him.
that's an understandable mistake from our perspective as an audience, you know?
And it also helps that the next day, because he tells her that you know he calls her the next morning off
Hmm.
screen,
Yeah.
which I do think is also an interesting choice
Yeah.
because they exchange. You know, she gives him his number 1-800. What is it? 1-800 bittersweet or something?
Something like
Bittersweet
that. Yeah.
800. And I
Hmm.
was like, I like that. That just sounds
I like
nice.
that.
I don't know what that means as far as numbers, but I like it. But the next morning she's like at her big mansion, her father owns a big company or whatever, and she's like,
When it had that opening shot, I out loud went, "Whoa!" Like I was not, I didn't know where she comes from or where, you know, what her life is like. And just like that staircase, I was like,
yeah.
wow, look at that.
Yeah,
Opulence.
opulent for sure. She comes down the stairs and you know she's like, oh, he called me this morning, he's gonna come over and see me.
I'm doing a little tea
And
party.
yeah, and she's doing a little tea party. She, you know, the song that he sang the night before, she has
Hmm.
those items in the song prepared:
Yes.
gingerbread and cake and
Hmm.
creme de menthe. um and he doesn't show up,
Yeah.
at least on time, and they start putting away. I love the way that she's going up the stairs kind of defeated, and the butler stops her and goes, oh, Miss Joan. And she's like, yeah. He's like, looks like our guest didn't come after all. And she's like, nope. And I'm like, all right, dude.
Yeah, you really didn't have to rub that in, being like, man, we got no takers on our gingerbread.
Yeah,
It's like,
he's
yeah,
like,
I
listen.
know.
he was just pissed that he had to
I
like
was
go.
there,
Well,
Jeeves.
because also when she asks him, he's like, "We have gingerbread, we have cake. I don't think we have creme de menthe." She's like, "Could you go ahead and get some?" So I love the idea that this guy was just so petty that he's like, "I
Yes.
went out and bought this. No
And
one
no
came."
one ate it.
I'm like, that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, that's funny.
Um, but he does show up immediately after that, and has a bit of funny banter about normally guests show up at my house from her father of like on time, and he's like, I don't know. They go on some dates. Anything to say about
Not especially.
she's immediately kind of won over by that he showed up at all. Again, I do
Yeah.
kind of buy that she is just like, and maybe it's just because I watched this when I was like, dealing with a pretty random crush on a person.
Mm,
Kind of blindsided me. I was like, I kind of get this. Like, I kind of
sure.
get, like, I would be like, yeah, no, it's great that you came at all. Um, but yeah, so they start going on dates. They go out to the lake. There's a line where she's like, "Do you make love to all the girls you take out here?" And I was like, "Did you make love?" I'm like,
Is that what you
I'm like,
did?
I don't know the history of this phrase. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, okay, all right. And does he propose to her here, or is it after this that he doesn't tell her initially, right? He just starts
Yeah.
blabbing to people that they're engaged.
Uh-huh. I don't think, yeah. If I remember
Right.
correctly, yes.
Right. Now we get to personally my favorite part of the movie
Hmm.
is that Jerry has two friends.
I love his two friends.
His two friends, which are Buck and
Claire, I think. No, Claire's the
no,
other one.
Claire's his
Excuse me.
ex.
Yes.
Is
V,
it
Vi?
Vi? It's
Vi.
Vi. Thank
Yeah.
you. It's Buck
Buck and
and Vi.
Vi.
My favorite thing about them is that they aren't together. They aren't married.
Yeah.
This is just a movie in which Jerry has two friends and one of them is a woman.
Hmm.
And her husband has died or left her.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact details, but then they just go around to
Hmm.
bars together. And I was like, this is
They
a
just hang out.
fantastic little dynamic. Like, it's just so like
Buck has a catchphrase.
Buck has a catchphrase, which is just this is what our country needs, and then
Hmm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Less blondes, people who don't drop things.
That was almost my Letterboxd review, is what this country needs is more men getting cucked by Cary Grant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so. Um, but I mean, I really was just once again just pleasantly surprised by this dynamic of just like I don't think I've ever seen anything like this.
It
You
almost
know?
like it has echoes of uh the employees at the Bailey building and loan in It's a Wonderful Life. You've got his uncle and you've got like the secretary and like that little kind of group, and they're kind of
Yeah,
playing off of each other. Like it's a nice energy for side characters that we don't get as much anymore.
yeah. Well, and also just like for the time, it's just kind of interesting to see women be friends who can socialize
Yeah.
rather than be a romantic, a source of romance or a mother. Like the fact that
Hmm.
Vi is just like a single woman
Yeah.
who goes out to bars with her two guy friends, I just felt like
It's nice.
absolutely thrilled by. I just
Yeah.
think that's so fun. And also it's we're still in comedy territory with Jerry's drinking, right?
Hmm.
So this is there a baritone in the house? Which
Right.
is just Jerry entering the bar and just being like, "Oh, we should, I'm engaged. We should celebrate. We should sing a song. Oh, what
Hmm.
do you sing?
Yeah.
Okay, we got three parts. We just need a baritone."
Yeah.
And that becoming his fixation as they kind of go
Bar
on
hop.
through the
Hmm.
night. Best joke in the movie is going into a place and being like, "Is there a baritone in the house?" And the
The
bartender being like, "I don't
baritone
let
in
them
the
in here."
house. It's good.
They go, "You don't?" And then they just leave.
Yep.
And that just gets me every time. That
Hmm.
he's just like, "I don't let them in here." It's funny. Me personally, I wouldn't let tenors in, and I say that as a tenor.
Yeah.
I feel like baritones are usually pretty chill guys.
That's fair. That's
You
fair.
just don't want those like tenor ones. You don't want those guys in your place, you know?
Shots fired. Oh no.
Oh, is that you?
Yeah, that's me.
I speak for myself. I'm a tenor too. It's not like I'm different. We're the same. Anyway, whatever. So I also love in this scene when they go to the bar and the bartender's like, "I'm a baritone." And the look that Jerry gives him when he's putting a little too much sauce on it, the
Really
bartender
good.
cracked me up, made
Yeah.
me laugh out loud.
Hmm.
and obviously, he's blabbing a little too loudly about his engagement to Joan before it's really happened. One of his fellow reporters hears it and writes it down. And
Yep.
the next morning, oh no, it's in the news.
It's in the paper. Uh-oh.
Anything else you want to say about this whole sequence?
Just at the tail end of that, I do find it another archetype that we don't get as much. I love just like the stink rival, just like some dude who is out to get you. You just hate him and he hates you, and that's the entire relationship. And I think it pays off in a very nice way at the end of the movie when he throws him a bone. He's
Yes.
just like, hey, do you
You,
read my
you never
column?
you never do read my column, did
Yeah.
you?
Mm-hmm.
Check. I think this might interest you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like it is a nice little moment that again I love with those characters of like having an antagonistic relationship and then a moment of kind of like human empathy in there is
totally.
nice.
Yeah, a great point. Yeah, we just need to bring back more guys who are just like in a constant kind of
Mm-hmm.
snarl, nose turned up
Absolutely.
work rival in movies.
Yeah.
Just more snooty guys.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then Joan calls Jerry at work and is like, "You have to come over. My father wants to talk to you."
Yep.
Um, and he goes over, and her dad's like, "What's this? Don't do that." And then Joan's like, "Actually, I'm into it. I accept the proposal." And the
Mm-hmm.
father's like, "Okay." And then they have an engagement party that Jerry doesn't show up to because he's
He's
drunk.
drunk.
And this is where it's not funny anymore,
No.
right? And were you expecting that out of this at this point?
I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
I had thought that he was going to show up and make a fool of himself, that
Mm,
he was going to say things he shouldn't say and go on and whatever else. But I think it is just as effective to just have him like just not show up and just be
yeah.
passed out in the back of a car.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess like is so before this you had clocked this was going to be a story about his alcoholism. It's
Yeah,
pretty
it's
apparent early
kind
on.
of it's pretty straightforward when you start getting into it. It's like, okay, so this is gonna be the major hurdle for this relationship.
Yeah.
Again, it played out in ways I wasn't expecting, but I kind of had guessed that that was going to be the angle it would take once the story got going.
Right. Yeah.
What about you? Did
Um
it blindside you the first time?
I don't remember.
Fair.
I don't remember anything
Did it
about watching
blindside you
this.
this time?
No. Well, a little. I mean, I remembered that it was
Yeah, how much of this did you remember? Did you know it was about alcoholism?
I don't think I did.
Okay.
I don't think I did when I brought it to the show.
All right. There you go.
I don't know why I put this on the calendar.
Dance Girl
Anyway,
Dance is right there. It's hey, it's in the
hey,
National Film Registry. Could have made it big. Could have gone huge.
you should have said something, Parker.
I
You
thought you
thought I
had a
had
plan.
reasons. You
I
thought I
thought
had a
you had
plan.
reasons.
I don't have a plan. Just because we planned the schedule out a year in advance doesn't mean I know what I'm doing,
That's so
as
funny.
we learn earlier this evening. I got the dates wrong. Anyway, it's fine. Jerry misses the engagement party and Joan stands by him and they get married and he doesn't have the ring on him at the reception and
Yeah.
she's like, "That's funny." Like she's like, "Okay." And he's
Hmm.
like, "Oh, ooh,"
Yeah, I mean
like,
he literally puts a corkscrew on her finger.
yes.
Like
Yep.
it's not subtle. This movie is not. It is melodrama. We're
Parker, at
going
what point
big.
at what point did you did you realize this was gonna be about alcoholism? Um, Jerry writes, he's also a playwright. He writes some plays, they're all rejected.
Hmm.
I did like there's this brief insert of like one of the rejection letters framed. There's like a
Yeah.
few of them framed, and it's like evidence of the fall of America or something.
Yeah,
Like,
like the state of modern theater or something
yeah,
very
something like
funny.
that. It's pretty good. But he does manage to sell a play, and they
Hmm.
travel to New York to watch the production. Uh-oh, it's
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 his
Envy Adams from Scott Pilgrim. No, it's not.
because like he that's one thing we did skip over is that
Yeah.
when they're in the car making out, uh she asks like, "Oh, do you always make love to the girls you bring out here or whatever?" And she asks about like, "Well, how many other girls have there been? Like, have you
Yes.
mentioned something when we met about like being in love?" And he mentions Claire, and he's like, "Oh, this woman, passed through my wake and wrecked me, and
Yeah.
I'm over it now though. And
Yeah.
he later on has a moment where he drunkenly talks to her picture on his
He does, and
desk.
he's like, I just met a girl who made me feel something for the first time since you.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
like I said,
So
it's his Envy Adams from Scott
yeah,
Pilgrim.
absolutely. It's a good pull.
Thank you. Her name's Claire Hempstead.
Hmm.
She's an actress. She's in the show.
She's played by
Um,
Brie Larson.
yeah. And on the premiere night, he drinks heavily and becomes inebriated and mistakes Joan for Claire. Claire is doing this very intentionally, though.
Yeah. No,
You know,
like she
she's
very much
bringing
is
him
like,
out
hey,
on
I've
stage.
got, some alcohol in here if you want something to take the edge
Yeah,
off. Like, yeah, it's very
it's a
manipulative.
real woman from the city. Let's
Hmm.
just say
Yeah.
that from
I wonder
Sunrise.
if I would have liked this movie more if we hadn't watched Sunrise, because Sunrise is doing a better melodrama than this for me. And I think that's because it's silent, like it
Yeah,
can just kind of lean into that. But
yeah, that's true. That's a
that's
good
neither here
point.
nor there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I should have put this before Sunrise. No, that's fine. I really am like, this is an interesting thing to bring to the show just because it really is just kind of a movie.
Yeah, just a movie.
But yeah, so when Joan catches Jerry trying to sneak out to Claire's one night, she kicks him out
Hmm.
because he's still seeing her after the show is done. And then the following day, she tells him that they will have a modern marriage and that she's going to have affairs too.
Yep.
And it's a pretty good line. I wish I'd actually written down the actual line that she says, but she's like, we'll have a modern marriage. We'll both, separate twin beds and brotamines in the morning or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and then when Jerry is next seen, he is making him. He says "Merrily We Go to Hell" every time he makes a toast.
Hmm.
Good toast, I would say.
Yep.
Just kind of like I know who this guy is. He's making that toast with Claire, and then Joan shows up
Hmm.
with her date,
Yep.
which, as you said, is Cary Grant
Cary
at age
Grant.
28, 7 years older than her, 6 to 7 years younger than Frederick March. Frederick March is like
Fascinating.
12 to 15 years older than her. And
You
it's kind of
can see
wild.
it.
You can see it. And
Yeah.
it is just kind of wild that there's just like this brief moment where Cary Grant is in an age appropriate relationship in his film career.
Oh boy.
No, because Katharine Hepburn's, right? Right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in turn, Joan and her date toast to the holy state of matrimony, single lives, twin beds. There it is. That's in her toast with Cary Grant and to all the men that are around her as well. That's where that line is. And then and then she leaves him. She just stops talking to him, right? And when is it that he wakes up and realizes and like tells Claire to get out of his life or whatever? Is that after that? It's like pretty soon after that.
Yeah.
He has
'Cause
this great
it's
scene where he's like, Claire, you've been in my head for so long, and I don't want, like he,
yeah, because it's the party that they're having,
yes,
and Claire is making out with him in the kitchen and making a big show about it. And
yeah,
Joan finally was like, I'm done. I'm not dealing with this anymore. Uh,
yes,
and
that's
like
what
she
it
keeps
is.
trying to tell him, she's like, I need to talk to you. And he's like, no, my guests, I'm hosting all this stuff. And then when she's like leaving, he kind of sobers up. He's like, oh God, like what's going on? She's like, I'm leaving. I'm done.
I'm
I
leaving.
cannot do this anymore. Because she has a
Yes,
really nice moment with Vi, because Vi is divorced.
yes,
Vi
yes.
has this
Thank you.
monologue earlier, not a monologue, but has a scene with Joan where she's like, I should have got out sooner. Like, there's just you can tell, you can feel it in your bones, and like I hope hey, I love Jerry, but like if you ever need to get out, I hope you get out soon, like when it's time.
Which it feels like such a modern scene
Yeah.
to me. Like again, just wild to have for when this movie came out to have a scene between two women where
Mhm.
she's literally just like, I hope that you leave your marriage before it's too late.
Yeah.
Speaking as a single woman, as a divorced
Mhm.
woman.
Yeah, and so she has a moment with Vi where she's like, I think I should have left ages ago, and I think I need to do I can't, I need to do it now. And so
Yeah,
she leaves, and that's when Jerry, like everybody
that's
else
when it's
leaves, and
because
he blows up at Claire.
yes, that's
Yeah.
when he says that.
Mhm.
And then Claire leaves and Vi and Buck come back
Yeah,
to his
because
room and he's packing
right.
and he's like, I'm gonna go find this girl.
Yeah, because Joan's
I'm
like,
gonna
you've
go
never
find her.
once said you love me. Like you call me like
Yeah.
I really love the line where he's like, don't you know, I think you're just like, if you say swell one more time, I think I might kill you. Like,
Yeah.
it's really, it's good. It's good, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And then yeah, and that's when he's and it is an interesting cut to me where he's like, I'm gonna go after her.
Hmm.
But then we cut to months later
Yeah.
and it hasn't been successful. Like he hasn't
Hmm.
been able to reach her.
Yeah.
And I do think it's a pretty um like efficient and elegant way to show how time has passed because he's at his
Totally.
desk. He got his job as a reporter back. He's
Hmm.
back at the same desk in the same office.
Yeah.
But he pulls out a letter that he wrote that has return to sender stamped on it. And we get to read the whole letter that he sent to her. It's just like, I love you. I love you. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
Hmm.
And then he pulls out like a stack of like 12 of them from inside of his desk and just looks at them and just tosses them back in. And I'm like, that's pretty,
This whole scene reminded me so much of the montage in When Harry Met Sally, when he's just desperately trying to get her
yeah,
attention, you know?
yeah, yeah. except except Harry Burns wasn't coming back from not saying I love you and being drunk through every major moment in their
True.
relationship.
Exactly, which is why the end of the movie works.
Um God, when Harry Met Sally could be so bad if any part of it
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
perfect, and yet,
Oh yeah. And yet
and
here we
yet,
are.
and yet here we are. Isn't that lovely?
Isn't that lovely?
Um. Anyway, he keeps trying to reach her. He calls, and her dad's like, "Stop calling, and you can't use different names. I know it's you."
Shout out to the
It's
dad. I really like
shout out
this
to the dad.
dad. He's
He's doing a
great.
good. He's doing a good job.
He's doing a very good job, you know?
Um.
George
Yeah.
Irving.
Who is it?
George Irving in his
George
name.
Irving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he does a good job.
Yeah, and then this is the moment that you alluded to earlier, where Jerry's, his enemy at the paper
Hmm.
comes over and is like, "Well, did you see the news in my column?" And he's like, "No."
He's like,
He's
I
like, "Oh
never
yeah, you
read
never
your
read my
column.
column." And
Hmm.
he's like, "Oh, this might interest you." And it's a little excerpt from his column of just like, "Oh, Mrs. Jerry Corbett,
Hmm.
née Prentice, had a baby today."
Yeah.
And so he rushes over. I like how the hospital looks. It looks like a set in the
Yeah.
best way possible. Like it looks just kind of like there's no ceiling on it. Like it
Hmm.
just looks like stage doors, and I think that's kind of fun. Like a theater set. Um, he comes down the hallway. The dad's there. I do like how that moment is played of the dad being like, "Get out of here! Like
Hmm.
you're not coming in here." He's like, "I got to see my baby." He's like, "You don't
Yeah.
have a baby."
Yeah. That reveal, I was like, whoa,
Yeah,
was
it's
not
wild.
anticipating.
Yeah, of like your baby died, and if she survives, is never going to see you again,
Yeah.
and I will make sure that happens. And like
Yeah.
she doesn't want to see you.
Another really good line in there that I love is he's like, the baby's died. She's touch and go, basically. He's like, if she dies, I'll kill you. And he's like, if she dies, you won't have to.
Yes,
It's a good
yeah,
line.
I agree. That is a great line. Yeah, I do really like that. He's doing some of the work.
Yeah.
It's just that he's got a lot to go up against, and the movie's about to end,
Totally.
so we don't really get the time to be like, all right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the dad goes in and she's like, "Get Jerry," and he's like, "Okay," and then he goes back outside. He's like, "He doesn't want to see you."
I almost like I thinking about it again, like because we were talking about this ending earlier. I even on the first watch, like I kind of wanted the movie to end there, to just be like a full-blown tragedy that this father, when faced with this and like knowing that his daughter wants to see him, but then ultimately stepping in and being like, I have to decide what's best for you right now, and this guy is not it. And
Yeah,
him just coming out, she's like, she said she doesn't want to see you. And
yeah,
I kind of wanted Jerry to just walk away, you
yeah.
know?
That's
There's
that.
something about that ending.
That's very interesting. I think you're right that is a very interesting alternative ending to this that I think
Yeah.
would also work. Again, it's such a strange ending in the sense that all the themes that the movie's been working with are there,
Hmm.
and the ending just kind of doesn't line up with it.
Yeah.
And so there's all
Also,
this different, typically we're not people to be like, and this is what I'd change. It's just
right.
like, it just feels like there's so many different options for something that feels a little more in step with what the movie's going for the whole time.
Totally. I also thought it was interesting, and I don't think this is a wrong read. It's just not the way I had read it originally, which when you were reading off the quotes, that in the essay, I think it's the essay that the author read her lines as calling him like my baby.
Yeah.
And when I watched it, I fully read it as her like mourning her child of like
Yeah.
my baby, which I thought very interesting. It's like not our baby, my baby.
That's interesting
Like
too.
that's what I was thinking about. Is like she's there, he's there, and she's happy to see him. And she's also like, I just went through this horrendous thing and you weren't here for any of it, and you will never get to be a part of that. I'm
It's like
glad you're
this,
here, but this isn't for you.
it's this mix of like joy that he's there and also mourning.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Like that, I fully read it as her talking about
I like
the
that
child who
more.
passed.
I like that more. That keeps
Yeah.
a lot of that bittersweetness there.
Hmm.
That is interesting.
I hadn't even connected that it might be directed at him, which makes sense, but
Yeah. And then he says, I love you.
hmm.
And that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Interesting. Here's the thing. I started this episode by being like, is this the least interesting movie that we brought to the show? It might be. But that's just because we've brought a lot of interesting movies to the show.
Sure.
By nature of the premise of the show requires it.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't say this is a bad movie. I mean, we both gave this 3.5 stars.
Yeah. Don't regret watching it.
No. I don't think it's going to make it through the criteria personally, but
Have my
because
doubts.
here's the thing. Let's go into criteria. Are you good to go into
Yeah,
criteria?
yeah.
Okay. Historical and technical relevance. Dorothy Arzner as a person,
Totally.
absolutely.
Like you talk about why bring this in conversation with Citizen Kane. I think Arzner is the reason you bring it.
Yeah,
Like I think
totally.
she is. This is going to sound so trite, but like follow me for a second. Like I think she is to women directors what Citizen Kane is to film. Like
Yeah,
she is, the trailblazer. She is the standard, and like again, is somebody whose work, even if it wasn't culturally super impactful, like has stood the test of time, has had her work reevaluated, had a huge resurgence in the 70s and things like that. And like
yeah,
I think she, in conversation with Kane and with Orson Welles, is the more interesting piece of this than the film itself.
definitely, absolutely. And that's where I am like, oh man, like if we ever circle back to Arzner, I would love to do Dance Girl Dance for that reason. I didn't realize that was in the film registry.
Mm-hmm. The first
Um,
time I heard about it was that documentary I've told you about.
oh,
Yeah, they talk about it in that. And I was like, oh,
interesting.
that's an interesting, I should watch that film sometime.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, like, I was kind of like very harsh on like, why would I bring this to the show? But like
Sure.
again, the main through line has just been who Dorothy Arzner was,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's worth bringing any of her work to the show for sure. I do kind of wish that I'd had more of a solid thought on bringing this specifically, so that if there was a more fitting pick from her, that we could have brought that in. But ultimately, glad we got to talk about her.
Yeah.
This doesn't hold a candle to anything that Kane
No,
does.
no.
So point to Kane.
Point to Kane. How well
How
is
is
this
this
doing when
movie?
yeah.
Yeah. We just start pressing A on our own pod. We're just like, all right, skip the dialogue, skip the dialogue. Yeah, we know. Um, again, up to a point, I think it's mostly working. I
Mm-hmm.
think it sells you on the charm and then makes it into, oh man, this actually is really awful for Joan.
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it does sell that again. There's these scenes specific. I'm so glad. I can't believe, Wikipedia just doesn't include in the summary, and there's not a plot synopsis for this on IMDb.
Sure.
And I hadn't watched it. I watched this like a week ago.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you brought up that scene between Vi and Joan, because I
It's a
think that
nice scene.
that is a really nice scene. It is kind of like, early on we have that POV shot from Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think like for the side characters and for like the movie's point of view to come through, it's crucial that we have that interaction between these two women.
Yeah.
And like give that opportunity for Joan to step away and to see that there is something on the other side. The ending doesn't line up with that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, is it doing what it's trying to do better than Citizen Kane is?
No.
No,
No.
no,
That's okay.
no. um, did you like it?
I liked it well enough.
Yeah, you're not gonna buy this at the next Criterion
No,
sale.
I
Sorry,
yeah.
the current Criterion sale.
hmm No, I'm not.
No, no, me neither.
Yeah, didn't think so.
But again, I'm glad. I'm happy to watch it.
Sure.
It is an interesting film. It's always interesting to visit something pre-code like this, and I think again, like I think the performances in it are pretty great, pretty
hmm
solid. Um, and it is my gateway to Dorothy Arzner.
Yeah,
So for that, I am grateful. And that
totally.
is the thing that made more of an impact than the movie itself, was watching those supplementary materials, a documentary about her
Totally.
that was on the disc as well. So that's a clean sweep for Kane.
Yeah.
Okay.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Max. Yeah, it is. Parker, it's fine. Next time is going to be a blast. I promise.
It's gonna be great. This was not a bad time.
And this was not a bad time.
This was a clear cut winner.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that sometimes that happens.
And sometimes that happens. I mean, again, I introduced this episode by saying, you know, what this country needs is fewer films that are better than Citizen Kane. On our current list, Citizen Kane is like 40. It's like number 40
hmm
best film of all time, according to us. It's nice to fill out that bottom tier.
Yeah, yeah. Can't be so mean to Kane all the time.
Once again, this isn't bottom tier. It's not like this is down there with Gump and
No.
Showman. No.
Ugh.
Love Actually. No.
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 Uh, in that case, Max, would you like to say it?
Wait, is this basically a Love Actually story? Would Richard Curtis have included this exact story in Love Actually and been like, isn't it so lovely that at the end they're together again? And you go, I guess, Richard.
I just think that if you look around, you see that love is forgiving your alcoholic husband.
Love Actually is forgiving your alcoholic husband. um, all right. Well, that's it. I guess I'll say it. This is all my fault. This movie didn't even have, it wasn't even trying to measure up to Kane because Kane didn't exist yet. It was
Yep.
10 years away.
Mm-hmm.
But no, Merrily We Go to Hell is not better than Citizen Kane.
Heard it here first.
Even if the title
Friends.
does kind of encapsulate much of 2025 so far. Halfway through the year,
Mm-hmm.
that's exciting.
Yes.
I think we have a lot of great stuff coming up.
I'm excited.
I think it's going to be a great latter half of the year.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be good.
It's gonna be good.
And we're going to kick that off real nicely. I mean, technically, this did kick off the last half of the year, but
Sure.
looking ahead, Parker, what's next?
Next time, friends, we reach glory in Chrome as we go on the Fury Road. We will be watching
Wow.
George Miller's Mad Max Fury Road 2015.
Wow, merrily we go on the Fury Road.
Mm-hmm.
We follow the Fury Road.
We follow the Fury Road.
That'll be fun.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't revisited it since Furiosa came out, so that'll be fun.
That will be fun.
I mean, I don't plan to talk about it in context of Furiosa
I was
at
gonna say,
all.
I don't think it'll be kind to Furiosa. I can tell you that much. But I'm thrilled to talk about this movie. I love this movie so much, so that'll be fun.
Oh yeah, no, it's gonna be good.
And a good excuse to just revisit it. Good one.
Yeah, always good. Always good to revisit the faves. And always good to record with you, Parker. Thank you for being here, and thank you to everyone for listening. If you listened to the Merrily We Go to Hell episode,
sometimes you get the real niche audience.
You must really like this movie, or you must really like us. And that's very kind of you.
That's very kind if it's the latter.
All right. Well, I'll see you, everybody.
All right. Take care. Bye.